Hi everyone, Amy here. I am super excited to be doing my first video tonight for my Crime Time series on YouTube. Now I know everybody and his or her brother seem to have a crime channel now on YouTube, but in my defense, I have been interested in criminal behavior and crime for many, many years since I was a kid, probably before a lot of these YouTubers were even born. So I feel like I kind of earned just a little tiny little spot on YouTube to share my interest and hopefully topics that you'll find interesting as well. But I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my background. I'm reading my notes here. So I was a kid of the 70s, and that was a very different time from now. Things were a lot different. Back then, I think most little girls were dreaming of being princesses or, wanting to get married and plan their big dream wedding. And here's me. I wanted to be tough like Chuck Norris and chase criminals. That was my big interest. So, just always very interested in criminal behavior, and that interest really continued to grow as I got older, and I became really interested in human behavior, why people behaved the way they did, more specifically why they behaved badly, how did serial killers come to be made, and how people, why they became violent. And so I went to college and majored in psychology, did a lot of my own research, and towards the end of my college years, the movie Silence of the Lambs came out, and I was like, that's what I want to do, because it combines psychology with criminal investigation. And I even called the FBI headquarters in Quantico, Virginia, and the man who answered the phone answered it, Violent Crime Unit, and I was so excited. I was geeking out. And I don't remember who it was I spoke to. It's very possible it actually was John Douglas, the very famous man, FBI agent who really pioneered a lot of the profiling with the FBI. Or it may have been there was another guy who was very famous and popular around the same time. I just don't remember. But he told me that unfortunately, they do not hire outside of the FBI for profilers. And they don't actually call them profilers. They're called behavior analysts. And I'm going to read just real quick what behavior analysts do in the FBI. They're law enforcement officials who specialize in forming theories to build profiles of unidentified criminals at large, especially serial killers. They blend psychology with pattern recognition and deductive/inductive reasoning, which allows criminal investigators to make educated guesses about suspects, sometimes accurately predicting their age, background, personality, and other identifying characteristics from the barest of clues. So, again, he told me that they don't hire outside of the FBI to do that. You actually have to be a field agent first, and that's something that I couldn't do because I sustained a lot of workout injuries in college trying to be tough. So that's kind of ironic, but and I also feel like I was starting to get sick with my chronic fatigue syndrome, which I'm now disabled with. So that kind of shot those dreams a little bit. So I had to come up with a new path to get to where I wanted to be. And I remember going to the Career Development Center at my college, and the woman who ran it, every time I came in, she would just roll her eyes and sigh because there was nothing she could really do for me. If I had been a business major, there was lots of information she could get with me, lots of programs, lots of leads, but she would just hand me this really huge, thick book, and I would go through it, and it was really just a list of universities, and I had to go through the whole thing to find what universities had, like, forensic psychology. It wasn't like today where there are so many programs everywhere, different kinds of programs, different branches of forensics. It wasn't like that, so I really wasn't able to find what I wanted to do. And then, I ended up graduating, getting married, and then I kind of let those dreams die, unfortunately. But my interest didn't die, and I did continue to read and research various topics, including what, how serial killers came to be serial killers. And, one thing that I was really interested in finding out is learning how to predict possible behaviors that may predispose people to becoming serial killers, in the hopes of, if we could identify some of these behaviors, maybe we could stop serial killers from becoming serial killers. So I did a lot of research on the whole nature versus nurture theories, and nature being, are they born that way genetically? Are they born with certain urges, instincts, compulsions? And nurture being their home environment, for instance. Did they come from a dysfunctional home? Were they abused? And then I came across a possible third reason for violence, and that is what I'm primarily going to focus on in this video tonight. Altered chemistry, brain chemistry, due to some kind of defect or disease in the brain that's formed later on in life, or traumatic brain injuries, TBIs. So the first thing that I'm going to discuss is an actual case, and it's based on the book The Crocodile Man, A Case of Brain Chemistry and Criminal Violence. Now, I got this book back in college. It was written in 1982, but it's still very relevant to today. And I didn't get to finish reading it back then. I think I ended up moving and I had to pack it away. So just recently, I picked up another copy and I read it. So I'm going to read you a little bit of the summary. Found a really good summary online of it that I liked a little better than what I had written, but I'm going to add to it as well. So this is based on a case in 1974. One night, a young Massachusetts man with the pseudonym Charles Decker picked up two teenage girls hitchhiking, rode around aimlessly with them for a while, drank beer, and then suddenly bludgeoned both of them with a stonemason's hammer, and damaged them so badly that I think he broke both of their skulls. And after he did it, he was overcome with remorse. He had no idea why he just did that, but he ended up leaving them in a place where they would be found very quickly and given medical attention. So then he went home and called his dad, who happened to be an endocrinologist, and he said, "I don't know what happened. I just went ape all of a sudden." So his dad contacted the family doctor and had him look at Charles. And I guess Charles had had a history of violent behavior when he was drinking, and unfortunately that was all hidden when it went to trial. But what the doctor theorized was, I'm going to read this to you, that there was a lesion in Charles's brain in the limbic system. The limbic system is the part of the brain which is also called the reptilian brain, and it houses, our primitive instincts, very much like a crocodile. Which the crocodile's brain, I'm sorry, I need new glasses, is mostly the limbic system. Anyway, he theorized that there was a lesion in the brain, in Charles's brain, and when he drank alcohol, this triggered his limbic system. It triggered it to go into overdrive. And now humans have a very well-developed frontal lobe that controls our urges and everything. But with Charles, his limbic system kind of overrode all of that reasoning and self-control. So I don't want to get too medical with you, but I do want to just describe a little bit more about the limbic system. So it says here that the limbic system is concerned with survival and emotion. Students of the brain like to say that its sphere of influence is the 4 F's: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and sexual behavior, so reproduction. Another way of putting it is to say that the limbic system provides the connection between thinking and feeling. Humans have all the instinctive reactions of primitive creatures like the crocodile wired into their brains, but they also have the ability to override their primitive instincts by applying their intelligence. In other words, they can stop and think. The limbic system, which links the lower and upper brains, makes this self-control possible. So again, basically, they're saying that in Charles's case, his limbic system was so stimulated that he couldn't control his impulses. So what they actually found out was he was suffering from a disease called Korsakoff syndrome, which is sometimes brought on by alcohol, but it's basically chronic memory disorder caused by severe deficiency of vitamin B1, which helps brain cells produce energy from sugar. So when his levels fell too low, his brain cells could not generate enough energy to function properly, and which made him very confused, and he couldn't remember things, and he would frequently become combative or violent. And one thing that I do want to read to you is just a little bit more about the limbic system. It's located in the cerebrum, and the majority of it's found in the temporal lobe. And again, it's our survival system, and it's constantly monitoring what is happening, if there's any danger of which we should be aware. If a person's limbic system senses danger, or it triggers our bodies to get ready for that fight or flight. So I'm just going to describe talk about a few of the different parts of the limbic system, so you get a better idea of what each part is responsible for. So then you can say, well, if there's a dysfunction in this part of the brain, then this could go haywire. So the first part is the amygdala, which that's where our emotions are housed, and it's also where our brain senses danger. It sends messages to the body in the form of stress hormones, and is intimately related to our fight or flight system. So damage to this can result in more aggression, irritability, loss of control of emotions, and deficits in recognizing emotions, especially recognizing fear. Then there's the thalamus, and that's our body's relay station. All the information from our body senses, except smell, they're all processed in the thalamus before it's sent to our cerebral cortex for interpretation. It also plays a role in sleep, wakefulness, consciousness, learning, and memory. Then the hippocampus is primarily involved with the consolidation of memory and creating new memories and connecting those memories to smell, sound, and emotion. And damage to this area may make it difficult to create a safe environment for incoming information or sensations. And then speaking of the 4 F's, those are housed in the hypothalamus, and those are the 4 basic and most primal drives. So when you think about humans versus animals, one thing that differentiates humans from animals is our really well-developed frontal lobe, which is where all of the reasoning and our self-control is. And when you think of animals, most of them are more driven by their primitive instincts. But then, when you see animals like dolphins and apes, they have more of a well-developed frontal lobe than, say, the crocodile. So the Charles Decker case was one of the first cases where they argued what would now be called temporary insanity, but it was one of the very first cases where the defense was using a physical cause in the brain, physical dysfunction in the brain versus a psychiatric function. So it was a real landmark case. So the judge finally allowed the doctor to do, all of these different tests, and he administered alcohol in a controlled setting, and they did find that Charles's body would make an unknown substance that would be released into the bloodstream, and it would cause him to be violent. They didn't find a brain lesion, but they said that was probably because for a while he refrained from alcohol, and it didn't show up on the scans. But it's a very interesting case. And some of the other things that can happen when there's frontal lobe damage, or I'm sorry, temporal lobe, let me go back. Temporal lobe damage, which is where the majority of the limbic system is housed, you see changes in personality, speech problems, difficulties with impulse control, poor coordination, difficulty planning or following a schedule. So he was eventually found, I'll read this to you, he was found to be, sorry, I need new glasses, guilty of attempted murder, but his sentence was suspended, and he was going to be on probation for several years, and he was not allowed to drink or anything like that. But it did say that he had a lot more brushes with the law in the future, after this case, where he did drink alcohol and become violent. So it was just very interesting to learn more about, like I said, different types of dysfunction of the brain. And I can't even tell you how many hours I have been working on trying to relearn the different parts of the brain. We studied them, of course, in psychology, but yeah, I couldn't remember a lot. So this was a really interesting case. So then to switch over to, I was doing some research, just general research on serial killers a few weeks ago to prepare for this video, and I kept noticing that a lot of serial killers, the famous serial killers, had sustained traumatic brain injuries. And, I actually had thought that's what this book was about, and I was going to tie it all in, but it still works out because, like I said, it's talking about, dysfunction in the brain. So I started to do research and found that, like I said, several of the famous serial killers had sustained traumatic brain injuries, or TBIs, early in life. So what I want to do now is I'm going to talk about the frontal lobe of the brain. And like I said, this is where, actually I am going to try to show you a diagram of the brain. Let's see, bear with me, I'm still learning all this. Okay, so, try again. Okay, so let's see. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. Okay. So this is the frontal lobe, and this controls higher level thinking, including reasoning, planning, language, long-term memory, impulse control, problem solving, emotions, judgment, motor function, initiation, and social/sexual behavior. So just going to lay that out there for you. Keep that in mind. And now I'm going to talk about several of the serial killers that are known to have sustained traumatic brain injuries early on in life. I'm just going to put their pictures up here, and then I have written in a notebook their injuries, so I'm going to pull that up. The first one is Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. At 2 years of age, a dresser fell on him and caused a laceration that required 30 stitches. Then, at 5 years old, he was knocked out by a swing in the park, which caused him to suffer from seizures afterwards, up until his teenage years. The next one, John Wayne Gacy, or the Killer Clown. At the age of 6 years old, he was beaten unconscious by a broomstick wielded by his father, and I guess he was beaten on a frequent basis. And then at the age of 11 years, he was struck in the head with a swing, and he suffered blackouts, and he was hospitalized later on for seizures that were caused by his father's beatings. The next one, David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. At the age of 6 years old, he ran into the road and was hit by a car. He suffered unspecified head injuries, and a few months later he ran into a wall and sustained even more head injuries. Then at 8 years old, he was hit on the head with a pipe and received a 4-inch gash. Next is Ed Gein, also known as the Plainfield Butcher, and he was inspiration for the character Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He claimed that his violent alcoholic father would beat him about the head so hard that his ears would ring. The next one, Arthur Shawcross, or the Genesee River Killer. At the age of 16 years old, he was hit in the head with a sports discus, and at 20 years old, he fell off a ladder, hit his head, and suffered a concussion. The next one is Henry Lee Lucas, or the Highway Stalker. And he claimed to have sustained numerous head injuries between the ages of 5 and 10, with the most significant at 7 years old when his mother hit him across the back of his head using a 2x4 block of wood. This injury resulted in a 3-day coma and caused significant damage to the prefrontal lobe of his brain. And, let's see. The next one, Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. As an infant, his mother had accidentally dropped him on his head. He had stopped breathing and had turned blue, but she did not take him to the hospital. And then, for whatever reason, I stopped writing, and the last one was Albert Fish, the werewolf of Wisteria. I'll just look up super quick his head injury so I can tell you. Just bear with me. Didn't realize there was another one. Okay, said that he fell from a cherry tree, which caused severe head trauma. Exact injuries unspecified, which caused him to suffer from dizzy spells and severe headaches for the rest of his life. So it's just very interesting to see that there there were a lot of killers who had sustained head injuries, and the UK actually did a study on 239 eligible killers, and they found that 28% were found to have definite, high probable or possible, um, 21% had suffered a definite or suspected head injury. Like I said, I need to get new glasses. So one reason, let's see, I'll switch back to camera here. Okay, so one reason why the law isn't very tough necessarily on juvenile crime is because children's frontal lobes are not fully developed yet. So as a result, they cannot necessarily, they don't have the same ability to reason or control their urges. So here it says, we are trying to understand exactly how inhibition manifests itself, especially considering that many mental illnesses, such as mood disorders, typically occur in adulthood. Indeed, a fascinating aspect of it concerns the maturation of the prefrontal cortex, which occurs in adolescence and children, and therefore they do not effectively, they're not effectively able to inhibit their instincts and do not have this type of control. So if you were ever wondering why they're a little softer on juveniles, that's why. And so also, just a few things, symptoms of frontal lobe damage, things that can affect movement are presence of tremors, dystonia, apraxia, gait disorder, and clumsiness with the tongue, I guess. Emotionally, difficulty controlling emotions, excitement, anger, and depression, including difficulty in understanding others' opinions. Behaviorally, difficulty in utilizing and preservation of behavior, social inhibition, and in some cases, compulsive eating. So again, if your frontal lobe is damaged, you may have trouble controlling your impulses. So this isn't to say that everyone who sustains a traumatic brain injury is going to become a killer or going to become violent, but it certainly bears some consideration. And you know, as I was studying this, and I kept seeing was hit in the head with a swing at the park, I thought back to when I was a kid, and I remember being at the park one day with one of my best friends, and we were swinging, and I don't remember if this kid ran in front of my friend or in back, but she ended up nailing him either in the head with her feet or with the back of the swing. And I'm thinking, my gosh, I hope that kid's not a serial killer now, because thinking, I wonder if their personalities changed at all. And now I'm thinking, well, I was hit in the head a lot, you know, during sports. Could that have, you know, changed my personality? So it's kind of interesting. I hope you found this interesting. I'm super nervous to do this because it's not easy for me to get in front of the camera, but I'm also very excited to talk about a lot of the topics that interest me. I don't know exactly where I'm going to go with this channel, except that as a writer, you know, they tell you to write what you know or write what you're interested in. I feel I'm going to do the same thing with my videos, and you know, just share topics that I find interesting. And I do know that my next Crime Time video is actually going to be on, let me pull up her name here. She's actually considered the mother of forensics, and I thought I had her name written down. Give me just a second here. Trying to assimilate all this information here. Okay. Frances Glessner Lee. And what she did, yes, she actually started doing little miniature crime scenes of specific crimes. And she really helped shape forensic science and really helped investigators solve crimes. So that's going to be my next topic. If you have any topics, any crime topics that you would like me to discuss, please let me know. Be sure to like the video if you liked it and subscribe. And thanks for watching.